David Barajas, born in 1982 in Alvin, Texas, he grew up with his siblings Gabriel and Tina and fell in love with a girl named Cindy at a young age. The couple welcomed their first son, David Jr., around the year 2000 when David was just 18. The following year, they had their second child, Cabe, and 3 years later, Jenna was born. David was devoted to his family, known for his kind nature and willingness to help others. By 2012, the family enjoyed watching their children grow. David fulfilled the role of provider while Cindy dedicated herself to the family and engaged in community improvement initiatives. The Barajas family experienced a calm and happy life. David Jr. was in high school and Kebab was attending elementary school. The older children were vibrant and loved spending time outdoors, especially playing football and watching their favorite team, the Houston Texans, on weekends. The family often visited the local park, where the children played while Cindy and David reveled in their laughter and mischief. They were all excited about the arrival of a new baby boy who was just 3 months old at the beginning of December. However, that happiness was shattered on December 7, 2012, when the lives of the Barajas family changed forever. That night, they all went out for dinner, and David let his children choose the restaurant. David allowed his children to choose the restaurant, and they opted for a Mexican place. Afterward, they visited a branch of a well-known U.S. department store, as it was nearly Christmas. The children eagerly explored the displays, contemplating what they might like for gifts, while David and Cindy took the opportunity to purchase a few necessities for the baby. They left the store around 11:00 p.m. However, when they were about 100 meters from their home, their van broke down on a dimly lit country road. Initially, David suspected they had run out of fuel, but upon checking the gauge, he found it still indicated more than a quarter tank remained. He turned on the vehicle's hazard lights and attempted to call for assistance, first reaching out to his father, then his brother, and finally a close friend. Unfortunately, none answered. Concluding that it was best to walk home together, David decided they could retrieve help to tow the van later. His 2 older sons, full of energy, seized the moment as an opportunity for a competition. They insisted they could help push the vehicle home. 11-year-old Caleb was eager to prove he was stronger than his father and his 12-year-old brother, even boasting that he could push it by himself. Although David was initially hesitant due to the darkness of the road, he ultimately acquiesced to his son's enthusiasm and took his place behind the wheel while the boys positioned themselves to push the car. Just as they began to push, a dark Chevrolet Malibu crashed into the back of the Barajas pickup truck, leaving them no time to react. Moments after the collision, Cindy, dazed, checked to ensure her 8-year-old daughter and the baby were unharmed. She exited the vehicle alongside her daughter, who began to scream upon seeing her brother Caleb struggling to stand. His leg was severely injured. The 11-year-old called out desperately for his parents. Cindy did not want her daughter to witness the horror unfolding, so she held her hand and guided her and the baby to a safe spot on the roadside. A group of young people, having heard the crash, approached to see what had happened. Cindy instructed them to look after her 2 little ones and requested that they call emergency services. She then ran to find her husband and children. David had been thrown into a ditch and was slowly regaining his senses. He realized that his right arm and wrist were broken. As he struggled to sit up, his ears rang, and he screamed for his children, desperately scanning the area for them. However, all he could see was the wreckage of the car that had struck them, which was severely damaged, and smoking. His truck was nowhere in sight, about 80 meters from the collision point. The confusion and pain were overwhelming. All David wanted was to locate his children and ensure their safety, but the situation grew increasingly chaotic. He could only hear his son Caleb's voice calling for him and his mother. When he finally reached Caleb, he discovered that one of his legs was missing, and he was barely moving. David knelt beside him, trying to comfort him and keep him conscious. Meanwhile, Cindy was with her son David Jr., frantically calling for her husband. Although she initially saw no serious injuries other than a bit of blood on his nose, she noticed his stomach felt cold, and he was not breathing. She attempted to revive him, but he did not respond. In desperation, she ran back to Caleb, took his hand, and asked him to pray with her. She shouted for help, but no one seemed to be coming. Amidst the chaos, several gunshots rang out from an unknown source, which bystanders reported to 911. A little over a minute later, the police arrived, followed closely by the ambulance. The paramedics appeared hesitant regarding how to proceed with Caleb due to the severity of his injuries and significant blood loss. David had to lift his son into his arms and place him on the stretcher so they could get him into the ambulance. At this point, Caleb lacked the strength to speak but remained conscious, keeping his eyes open. His mother held his hand, reassuring him that everything would be all right, trying to instill hope in him. As Cindy later recounted, David told Caleb that he loved him, that he would be okay, and that they would see each other at the hospital. When the Barajas couple attempted to return to where David Jr. was, officers intervened informing them that there was nothing more that could be done as he had passed away. Minutes later, one of the officers informed them that Caleb had arrived at the hospital without vital signs and that the doctors had declared him deceased. Both parents were devastated, grappling with the pain of losing two sons in mere seconds. Unfortunately, this was just the beginning of a mysterious crime that would unfold. The investigation began with efforts to identify the driver of the Chevrolet. A 20-year-old named Jose Vanda. Limited information revealed that he was married to Felicia Leja, 22, and that they had a baby girl just a few months old. As experts examined the severely damaged vehicle, they discovered that Jose had not only caused the tragedy for the Barajas family but was also lifeless in the car. However, his death was not a result of injuries from the collision. He had suffered a gunshot wound to the head. Police officers on the scene classified the case as a homicide and initiated an investigation to clarify the circumstances and identify those responsible for the accident. Neither Cindy nor David comprehended the gravity of the situation until a detective informed them that they were at a crime scene and could not leave until they were questioned. From the outset, police were suspicious of David, as he had a motive to want to end the life of the man who had taken his children's lives. The investigators' suspicions intensified after a witness reported seeing David leave the scene of the crime, walking home and returning to Jose's car just as the shots were fired. However, other witnesses noted a man firing near Jose's vehicle but could not definitively identify David as the shooter in their statements to the authorities. David recounted that amidst the chaos while searching for his children, two men approached him and began to assault him. He could not identify them or understand the reason behind their attack. When the officers questioned him about whether he had shot at the driver, he replied no. They also inquired if he had left the scene of the accident, to which he again answered no. Regarding whether he possessed firearms at home or had ever discharged one, he acknowledged, as every Texan does, that he knew how to handle guns but claimed he did not own any. Cindy informed the detectives that she had seen a light-colored vehicle speeding past the scene of the accident. She also noticed two individuals running, and she suspected they had entered that car, although she was not entirely certain. She remarked that the vehicle had passed so closely that she had to step out of the way. According to her description, the car had 3 spoke wheels and fled the scene rapidly. However, authorities seemed to disregard her statements and focus solely on David as the primary suspect. In pursuit of their hypothesis, they ordered a series of tests, including obtaining a search warrant for the Barajas family's residence. They also collected skin and clothing samples to detect any traces of gunpowder that would indicate a firearm had been discharged. In the midst of mourning the loss of their 2 eldest sons, the family faced the grim possibility of the father being imprisoned, leaving them physically and emotionally devastated. Despite their grief, they found the strength to say their final goodbyes to David Jr. and Caleb, remembered fondly as spirited, sports-loving boys. In their honor, many attendees at the memorial wore Texans jerseys, and a tribute with flowers and balloons was placed on the roadside where the tragic events unfolded. Meanwhile, Jose's loved ones also held a memorial service, mourning the loss of a father who would no longer be present in his daughter's life. While family members and the community grieved, the authorities continued to investigate Jose's shooting and executed the search warrant at David's home. During the search, investigators uncovered a gun holster and .357 caliber ammunition, which matched the bullet fragment found at the scene. Cindy pointed out that her husband frequently purchased used vehicles at auctions and sold them, which often meant discovering various items left behind by previous owners. The previous owner indicated that the box of bullets was under the back seat of a pickup truck they had purchased, and her husband had placed it on top of the dresser, where the police found it. The woman mentioned that they thought it was a phone protector or some piece from a tool belt, and they kept it in the bathroom. However, what the police could not find during the search was the possible murder weapon. There were no guns in the house, and they had no success with the gunshot residue tests conducted on David. The investigators then obtained the results of the DNA analysis carried out on Jose's car. According to the tests, bloody fingerprints were found on the driver's side door and on the armrest, which matched David's. Based on this evidence, on February 14, 2013, an arrest warrant was issued for him, and he was charged with murder. David was sent to Brazoria jail with a bail set at $450,000. David's arrest generated reactions from the community, which rallied in his support. Vigils and events were organized to raise funds for his defense, and a social media page titled Free David Barajas was created. Jose's relatives also established a page to demand that the person responsible for his death be punished, arguing that the young man's fate should have been left in the hands of the judicial system, and that David should not have taken justice into his own hands. Felicia, Jose's wife, expressed that she understood the father's pain at losing his children, but that this did not give him the right to take her husband's life, whom she considered a good man. The trial against David began on August 12, 2014, in the courts of Brazoria and received extensive coverage from U.S. news agencies, as well as many international media outlets. The story of the father who lost his 2 sons to a drunk driver and allegedly sought revenge captivated the public. For many experts, the prosecutors faced several challenges, as they had the sympathy of the majority of Texas residents. Furthermore, they did not have enough evidence to support their accusation. The Brazoria County District Attorney tried to prove in court that David had taken Jose's life out of anger after the accident. According to the prosecution's account, the man returned home, grabbed a gun, and then returned to the scene to fatally shoot Jose. He returned to the scene and fatally shot the driver, who had a blood alcohol level twice the legal limit. The prosecutor argued that while it was true that Jose caused the accident that took the lives of 2 children, he did not deserve to die as a result of revenge. The evidence presented by the state included the empty gun holster and ammunition found in David's residence, as well as DNA samples discovered in the vehicle of the driver who caused the tragedy. One investigator testified that he found a home security system at David's home that was missing its hard drive. He found this suspicious as it could have contained incriminating evidence. He believed that the security cameras outside might have captured footage of someone entering or leaving after the accident. However, during cross-examination by the defense, the witness admitted he did not know if the security system was functioning on the night of the incident. The prosecution faced a setback in the courtroom when none of the witnesses could definitively identify David as the shooter. Those who had initially claimed to see him near Jose's car were unable to maintain that assertion under oath. The defense argued that it was untrue that their client had taken justice into his own hands, emphasizing that he did not even own a firearm. 3 witnesses testified that more shots were fired long after Jose was fatally injured, suggesting the possibility that the real perpetrator remained at large. The defense further contended that the search of David's house revealed no evidence linking him directly or indirectly to the crime scene, although a forensic scientist testified that the blood found on the driver's side door and armrest of Jose's car matched David's. Additional tests conducted by the defense indicated that the blood belonged to Caleb and David Jr., and that it had resulted from the impact that claimed the lives of the 2 children. The defense also revealed that on the day of the incident, Jose was accompanied by a cousin and his half-brother whom Cindy claimed to have seen fleeing the scene in another vehicle shortly after the accident. This revelation surprised the court, as no one could explain how 2 members of the driver's family could abandon him at the scene and, subsequently, fail to appear before authorities to provide any statements related to the events. Both of these individuals were compelled to testify under oath during the hearing, and they admitted that they had assaulted David that night because they believed he was attacking Jose. This corroborated David's earlier account to detectives. The man informed the detectives about the night of the incident, but they did not take his statements into account. Jose's family members claimed they were with him that night and witnessed the accident. However, they asserted that they did not shoot it at him and fled the scene out of fear. Another crucial piece of evidence presented by David's lawyers to the jury was a police videotape from a dashboard camera. This footage was recorded by the patrol car of the first responders who arrived at the accident scene. In the video, David could be seen kneeling beside his son Caleb, seemingly attempting to resuscitate him. Cindy's voice was also audible, crying out and insisting that no one was touching Caleb because he was bleeding profusely. She emphasized that the boy did not have AIDS and urged them to take action. Additionally, the defense utilized the 3 911 calls made that night to reconstruct a timeline, demonstrating that their client did not have enough time to carry out all the actions attributed to him. The first call was made at 11:33 p.m., during which a person reported an accident involving 2 children being hit by a car. This caller was the same witness who later claimed to have seen David leave the scene of the accident for about 3 minutes. However, David maintained that he never left the scene. The timeline presented by the defense indicated that the first gunshot was heard at 11:35 p.m., and just 1 minute and 24 seconds later, at 11:37 p.m., the first police officer arrived on the scene, as confirmed by the dashboard camera footage. This meant that it took less than 2 minutes for the caller to report hearing a gunshot. The defense attorney argued that in such a short time frame, David could not have run home to retrieve the hard drive from the security system, returned to shoot Jose, disposed of the gun, and then knelt beside Caleb as recorded when the officers arrived. The prosecution contended that the shot heard in the 911 call was the one that killed Jose. However, the defense challenged this assertion. However, David's attorney argued that the gunshot was too quiet to have been fired at the scene of the accident. To support this claim, they conducted a test firing of a .357 Magnum at a distance of 2 meters from someone on the phone, recording the call. The gunshot from the test was significantly louder than the one heard in the 911 call. After several weeks of deliberation, the jury heard arguments from both sides and was left to determine David's fate, as he faced a potential life sentence. On August 27, 2014, after deliberating for 3 hours, the jury found 32-year-old David Barajas not guilty. This verdict indicated insufficient evidence against the accused. Upon hearing the verdict, The Barajas family and their loved ones erupted in tears in the courtroom, while members of Banda's family sat in stunned disbelief. David embraced his wife and made a few brief statements to the media, expressing gratitude to his family and the community for their support. He acknowledged that the trial and the pain of losing his children had been an immense burden. He emphasized that in this situation no one had truly won, as both families had suffered a devastating loss. The prosecutors faced harsh criticism from Texas society, asserting that the United States operates under the rule of law, and they felt compelled to charge David because they were confident in his guilt. Shortly after the trial, David and his wife participated in an exclusive interview with the Dr. Phil show, where they shared details of that fateful night. David recounted the moment he found his young son, who was gravely injured, and tried to comfort him. His leg was severed, and he was moving around. I went down to him. I don't even remember what I was saying, but I know I was beside him, trying to hold him. I remember seeing his leg under the vehicle, and I grabbed it and put it next to him. His shoe was still on his foot. Cindy recalled that after the accident, some people accused them of being irresponsible parents for allowing their children to exit the car on a dangerous road. David's acquittal was met with relief and joy by many in the community. However, there were also those who questioned the decision, believing that true justice had not been served. Despite the divided opinions, the majority of the community united to support the Barajas family in their healing process as they attempted to rebuild their lives after the tragedy and the trial. Jose's case remains unsolved, and no new information has emerged regarding any further investigations. Now that you are familiar with the details of the case, who do you think the shooter might be? Could it have been the cousin or half-brother who fled the scene? Or was it David himself, leading the jury to err in their verdict? We invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. Well, dear audience, that concludes this investigation. What do you think about today's case? We would love to read your comments, as your opinions on these cases are very important to us. Please remember to express your views with the utmost respect for both the victim and the other viewers, as well as for us who will be reading your comments. Before you go, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, share this video if you think someone you know might be interested. We'll see you next time for another investigation.